Today I'm sitting down with Danny to talk about one of his favorite movies, The Lighthouse. As well as going through the plot, script, and actors, Danny is going to explain to me the wide-ranging themes this movie touches upon, from Greek mythology and toxic masculinity to the labor movement. He'll also take us in depth on the technical challenges to make such a visually stunning and unique work of art. Within our chat, we'll also draw parallels between The Lighthouse and other films, ranging from Lord of the Rings and Pulp Fiction to Raiders of the Lost Ark and even WALL-E. But for now, sit back, relax, and welcome to my film club. And we're back with Danny. Welcome to your second episode of Dom's Film Club.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about The Lighthouse, and I am so excited about this episode because our last episode together we did one of my favorite movies, Casino, and today we're doing one of your favorite movies, The Lighthouse, which I've known was one of your favorite movies for years, but I hadn't watched until we planned this podcast. And it's a very you movie and not a very me movie, and I've watched it twice, and I will say that it is unquestionably a good movie, but it's not one that's easy to get the first time, and so I thought it would be super interesting to have you on to explain to us us regular people how to appreciate something that's really a piece of art. So tell us about your relationship with this movie and why you love it so much.
Okay, so basically, I was like hyped up from the moment I heard it was being made because I really loved The Witch by Robert Eggers, and then he'd gone like quiet for a few years, and then all it was announced was Robert Eggers is making a film with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and that was like, yeah. And I was like, that's it, that's perfect, because at that point, I think Robert Pattinson had really started to build a career of playing really interesting and like eccentric roles, and Willem Dafoe was just like great face, really good play reader. And then I think the only thing that came out was the still image of the one of the opening shots where it's just them two looking at the camera, and it looks they're almost like posing for a photograph. And then it's just like, yeah, a horror film set in a lighthouse in black and white starring those two. And that was it.
Which for Danny, that is the description of his perfect movie.
And then it took ages to come out in the UK, so you'd start hearing rumors. They did all the festival circuit. And I don't think it came out in the UK. I think it might have been January or February, right before lockdown.
Right.
Oh yeah, it was like 2020.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to find screenings of it as well, because even though it had like big names with it, and I think Universal released it over here, you just couldn't see it like any of the sort of mainstream cinemas around by me. So, and then there was one independent cinema that was showing it, but every time it was showing it, I couldn't make it. So then I had an even longer wait. So then I got the Blu-ray on the day it came out, and then yeah, I was just like, this is just a perfect film.
So after all of that hype, it didn't disappoint. That's amazing.
I think it exceeded everything. Because yeah, I'd say by the second viewing, I actually think this is a perfect film.
Wow.
Like, I think it's just one of like the best films ever made.
Well, that's quite the introduction, and hopefully today, like, as I said, my experience with it was, obviously you've been talking about it for years. It's strange because it came out in 2019. I know you said you didn't see it till 2020, and that's like, oh, it's 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, that was just COVID. It's still fairly recent. So I've known about it through you, and I knew of it as this artsy black and white movie. But I watched it for the first time a week or two ago, and it was honestly, it was exactly what I expected on the first viewing, but not in it put me off. But I was like, I have a big thing about movies, about it, if it's a bit complicated, I really need to just watch it once for the story. And now I'm like, okay, I know what happens. Now let me go back and just focus on everything else. And I knew after one viewing that it was already that type of movie. And so I watched it again a couple of days ago, and like level of appreciation definitely through the roof. And I've been researching for this, and I'm not a literature person by, like, I'm not a book nerd or anything, but I did study it back at school, and that has helped me have an appreciation beyond literature with movies and stuff to understand all the themes and everything. And this is clearly just a movie that is rich in that, and like symbolism and everything. I mean, you can spend your life basically analyzing it. And so I'm not at your level yet, but I do appreciate it. And you know what? I think probably after our conversation, I want to watch it a third time. So yeah, let's let's take it apart and figure out all the little bits. Before we get to that, what would be your spoiler-free description of this
So
one?
it's like a really, so on like a base level, it's a really simple story. So if we look at the screenplay, all it says, the characters, it says two wikis go to work on the lighthouse for 4 weeks. One young, a new assistant lighthouse keeper with a sordid past. One old, a crusty lighthouse keeper, his boss. And then chaos ensues. Or Robert Eggers' the way Robert Eggers himself has described it is nothing good will ever happen when two men are stuck in a giant phallus.
That's
Which
so.
I think sums it up quite well.
So the movie came out in 2019. We'll talk about this more in detail, but there's a couple of things that were inspired by it. The first was the Edgar Allan Poe
Yeah.
poem, though I did read about it and it seems very, very loosely based. It premiered at Cannes in 2019, then it grossed 18 million worldwide. Though it is interesting what you said about it not being available everywhere, and then obviously with COVID, so maybe it would have done more if it hadn't been for those complications. So that's about 2 million tickets sold. Based on the concave analysis, like it's been viewed at least 50 million times now. So I mean, it's like absolutely the sort of movie that gets the prestige of being out in theaters. It's not a straight to streaming, but then a lot of people, I mean, you're the biggest fan of this movie and you didn't get to see it, and now you've bought it in Blu-ray and everything. So big, very popular, critically acclaimed. Rotten Tomatoes score, do you want to guess?
It's going to be quite high. I don't know. I think 94%.
90%. And IMDb?
It depends. I don't know. 8.5.
7.4. And it was nominated for lots of stuff throughout, but the big one was it was nominated for the Oscar for.
It was in cinematography.
Yeah, that's right. So the last question before we do the spoiler line, because up until now we try not to spoil anything, and after the spoiler line we will be spoiling everything. But we like you to make a decision about whether you want to pause this and go and watch it before we go through. So the last question is, who should watch this film? Like, what does someone need to tell you that they want for you to say you should watch The Lighthouse?
Generally, anyone could watch it, but I also think it depends on what you want from the film as well.
Yeah, I think you don't want to go in expecting something different with it.
I think it's one of those films where what you're reading on it will what you bring to it. I think to an extent. I think also it might be. I think it's more. It would be more appreciated if you have like maybe a certain level of like cinema literacy, or like say even like books, or there's certain things going into it that if you know about it, you'll probably get all out of it. But I think on its base level, if you just don't try and look into any of the symbolism on its base level, I think it could just be like very like atmospheric. Maybe like Yaz was saying, she thinks it's like an experience of watching it. Especially, it's definitely one of those you want to sit down, lights off, don't look
Phone
at phones,
away.
and like let it so go.
I think, and this isn't a spoiler, I think it's fair to say, you were just saying the other day that it was Yaz said the first time, the first half is, it's not boring, sorry, it's slow. It's slow, like it literally, they don't really have a conversation for like 20 minutes. And so it is hard to get through for, again, not for someone like yourself, someone more like me who's more into like, more commercial movies. You do have to persevere through those first 20 minutes. Then they start getting into things, and then the second half things happen. But it's worth the payoff. So yeah, someone who's really, yeah, you need to put your mind to it. You want a thinker. It's a movie that'll stay with you. You will be thinking about this movie for a long time. So yeah, not to go in just for a casual evening where you're not going to be paying attention.
I don't think it's a date night.
Yeah, unless you're both really into that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I think it's a date night movie in the sense that you have people who say, "Oh, let's go catch that like foreign film with subtitles at the cinema." It's like, okay, if you want that, but in English, have this one. So with that, we're gonna draw the spoiler line. So from now on, we will be talking openly about what happens, the characters, everything at the beginning, at the end. So be warned. So, and this is an interesting one for this. We start with the entertainment because for me, I think everything else will flow easy, but that is the big barrier. Like the first time watching it, like I said, those 20 minutes, that's what I want to find out for you. Like the first time you watched it, were you entertained in those first 20 minutes? Did you already understand that this type of movie was going to deliver afterwards? Tell me about it, your experience with it.
So I think it's one of those films where right from like the opening shot, it's built like a world for you, so you almost know what to expect because it's just like you hear the foghorn the lighthouse comes up, and then it's like choppy waters, seagulls, and you can hear all these sound effects going on at the same time. The fact that when the young and old lighthouse keeper walk on the island, there's two lighthouse keepers leaving. You don't see that face; they don't even acknowledge each other. And then yeah, it's just him walking around. I think the first sound, human sound you hear is a fart.
Yeah, and then probably grunting a lot.
Yeah. But to be fair, there was a film that came out this year called Perfect Things, and that was about a man in he's basically a toilet cleaner, and it goes through his day. So it goes from him waking up, getting dressed, having breakfast, going cleaning the toilets, coming home. It was like a routine, and it does that. I think that I don't think there's any dialogue in that for the first 30 minutes. So I quite like that sort of behavior, like in film, because I think it sort of you get to know the characters' lives a little bit more. I think it's like Wally, like you don't hear
Yeah,
dialogue in
that's
that
true.
for ages and ages. So it reminded me of that, but this is like a very bad version.
I think that Wally is actually that's such an interesting comparison because most people will, but I think there is because they put in they make even though it's exactly the same thing that's happening, then but it's very cute and there's quite a lot of physical comedy with Wally, and obviously they know it's aimed for children, so they have to do that.
And I think the similarities with I've compared when I'm talking about Yaz or other people, I always compare stuff like Wally as an example because it builds, the world in it like almost instantly, and then you're happy just watching this activity go on, but it's built the world instantly. You know where you are, you know what type of vibe you're getting from it. And I think a lot of films that I think a lot there's like keeping someone's attention throughout like what you'd sort of call like mediocre behavior or like routine or
Mundane,
yeah,
more,
mundane,
more than
yeah.
mediocre. Yeah.
But I think just with this, there's a lot of that, but the atmosphere's there from
Yeah.
like shot one. And then I didn't know anything about, like, so I've not actually watched a trailer for it or anything, so I didn't know.
I cannot imagine what was in the trailer.
So I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just assumed little things keep happening bit by bit by bit. So I could how it was like ramping up tension. I remember feeling quite tense during all this stuff because bad stuff keeps like even little bits like your trip or things just don't seem right the whole way through, which I found quite like thrilling.
Yeah.
But I don't know how like other people might just be like, this is boring.
Yeah, I think it's on second viewing and my experience, I feel like on second viewing I almost experienced what you did the first. Obviously you didn't know the end, but you probably had a sense. And because I know where we're heading. I mean, so I know, we can say it now, past the spoiler line. He's gonna go crazy and everything's going to get crazy and like everything is not as it seems, like, and then also the symbolism, even without reading the cliff notes, after one watch, you're like, there's a lot of stuff that isn't like that's a lot more than surface deep. So second time you're like, that means something, and that means something, and that means. Whereas I think because you have a more you got a more sophisticated palette when it comes to films. It's true. You're able to on the first one being like, I don't know what that seal is going to represent, but I know it's important and stuff, and you're able to. And you might even tell me, but I'm just like, yeah, but I need to see it. And so now I watch it once, totally get the importance of the seagulls. So the second time, I have to say one thing. We will get to it more, but the sound. As soon as the second time I heard the horn, which obviously you hear the whole movie, I was like, oh, like this is like, and I like now whenever I hear that horn. Have you read the story about how they created the sound of the horn?
Yeah, there's a lot of go. That's like the craft element of it is such a key thing into this. But yeah, I know that there's basically every sound in it. It's very curated.
Yeah, we can talk about more like during the production. But yeah, so I guess big picture then the thing that's entertaining about this film overall, not just the beginning, it's okay. How would you describe it? What is it to you that's entertaining about this?
So I think the world building element's key to it. I think you also, without going into the craft elements of it, you feel like you're in a different world to ours, like everything that's going on. So there's that sort of world building element. There's the
Like an alternate,
yeah, or like it's something that we don't. None of it resembles anything that we have, like how we've led our lives. I mean, some people might.
I'm just because last episode we did Casino. We talked about that, but that took us to a place in a time that exists in our world. Whereas I feel you're saying it's like a different world.
Yeah. I feel like because obviously it's very much what you could basically almost call it like it's a historical horror film.
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like real life. I don't think.
Yeah.
You know, it's without going in, cause I'm probably going into it a bit more in depth, but it's like they've placed certain genre mechanisms onto as realistic like depiction of a historical past as possible, but nothing is quite as like you say, nothing. You know, when you're on the side, nothing is quite as it seems. I also think it's like really funny. I think it's really, really funny.
I can't think. I don't think I don't remember laughing a single time the first time, but then the second time I burst out laughing
Yeah.
a couple of times, and I'm sure every time it gets more. But yeah, so it's intellectually stimulating. Would that be
Yeah. I think it's also say if we take the broad, say it's like historical horror film, but it's involving so many different genres and different types. So I wouldn't. It's weird to call it a horror film straight up, but there's obviously horrific elements in it. There's like you can say there's monsters in it. There's like tension in it. There's like sort of semi jump scares, but not real jump scares. But like it's creeping atmosphere constantly.
It's definitely creepy.
Yeah. It's very like it's a very porny film. It's a very like you said literary film. It feels like
Feels like
it almost feels like a book.
it definitely feels like a book.
It feels like first edition,
Yeah.
old
Yeah,
dusty
so
book.
true.
It builds everything. Like I feel like it builds it to then. I think you can almost feel like what, it might almost have a smell to it. Even though it's a film, you could be like, oh, I know what that place is going to smell and feel like. It just everything about it is like building this one world.
I've read these things about there's people want to enhance movies, whether it's 3D or the 4VX or whatever. And one is that people want to maybe explore associating smells to movies. And my immediate reaction is like, I don't think like a lot of movies I watch, I don't want to smell them. Sometimes hearing it is a lot, but it's like at least that's like still at a distance. I do not need to smell this movie.
No, I saw someone that said that they said that they just know that if you were on that island, it would just smell of sea salt and jism.
And,
Yeah,
and shit. Stop all the bad things. Let's move on to the story. And I think we can probably get through this bit quite quickly. And then when we get into like the dialogue and the script, we can deep dive. But I'm going to say what I think happened and you can tell. And I know that I know it's one of those that there isn't like, this is exactly what happened. But I have a lot of questions for that. And not just, oh, I want to allow you to talk. I genuinely want answers about certain things. So Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe arrive. What Willem Dafoe has experienced, Robert Pattinson is his first shift doing it. As we find out later, he previously worked in lumber or whatever, and he didn't kill, but he let his boss die, stole his identity, and then he's like wandering around. He doesn't know what he wants to do. He hears that I don't know if he's escaping. Maybe he's escaping the shore as well because he doesn't want any attention, but he's doing it for the money. They arrive. They're supposed to be there for 4 weeks. Willem Dafoe says, I man the light, and that's basically all he does. He doesn't do anything else. He's crippled. I think what I have in my notes, was it the nuns or was it scurvy?
So he changes his story.
Okay, he does change his story. Okay, so he's crippled. So he mans the upstairs and says, "You're not allowed." Does he give a reason why he's not allowed?
That, like you need to earn it.
You need to earn it. Okay, and then we see for like those first quiet 20 minutes, Robert Pattinson does like a lot of back-breaking work. There's a bunch of like themes that get expressed. Like there's the seagull who is basically a reincarnation of the previous partner.
Yeah, it's implied.
It's implied that he killed.
So he said, so Willem Dafoe's character basically says his old, what would you call him?
Well, second wiki or whatever.
Yeah. He went mad because he thought there was enchantment in the light.
Right.
And then, does he say he went missing? No, I think he just says he went mad.
He went mad. And so I mean, that's a good. And then basically, Robert Pattinson goes mad. He starts off, he gets fascinated with the mermaid, little statue, jerks off to it, fantasizes about mermaids. Or some people say the mermaids actually are real in this world. I think he gets before the 4 weeks are over, he does get a little bit mad. He wants to see the light, but he's not able to. He refuses to drink, which is a big thing. Yeah. He does eventually relent. On the last night, he relents and he drinks with him.
So one of the sort of things with the job as well, he gets really angry towards like the end of it, and he actually, I think the phrase he says, I didn't sign up to be a housewife or a slave."
Yeah, that's
which
it.
is like, I think
because
he's cleaning in both of them. Yeah,
and he's cleaning out like the chamber pots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if it's the first time they drink, but they get smashed on the 4 weeks. I feel like the first time I watched it, there was an implication they might have missed their ship, but then it's like, no, the ship that was supposed to pick them up didn't come because of the storm.
Yeah, I think that's implied.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Or that they slept through it. Or they
right,
missed it
okay, yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
But then basically, then everything goes to shit. Robert Pattinson goes more and more crazy. Willem Dafoe obviously reacts to him, but he doesn't really change that much. He's kind of always weird, but then he becomes less weird than Robert Pattinson as it goes crazier. Then there's a whole. Then it gets really confusing over what's real and what's not about the time because Willem Dafoe says, "Oh, it's been weeks," even though Robert Pattinson thinks it's been days. They find more alcohol. There's the mermaid fantasies, but eventually
that relationship breaks down.
Yeah, they open up. That's when they reveal about their past, spill the beans.
Yeah.
Which I've just realized spilling your guts is what happens to him at the end, which is like a whole thing probably as well. But yeah, then they like, and then the hallucinations like go crazy, and he ends up basically, yeah, he first he tries to bury him alive, but he comes back from that one. Then he kills him for good, goes up, sees inside the light,
where we don't see what he
sees, sees something, falls back in shock, or is pushed back.
There's I think there's a few different ways you can read it, but you don't hear, so the sound cuts off, and it's almost like someone's got a microphone around their mouth and they're yelling into the microphone, but it's like distorted.
And you see that, is that him yelling, or is that the...
So that's him, but then you don't know if he's screaming or laughing, or it's like an ecstasy type thing. Then that it holds that for quite a long time, I feel.
And then you cut to him falling down the steps.
Yeah.
And then cut to him, we don't know exactly when, naked with his organs hanging out and the birds picking on them.
Yeah.
That's the story.
And then done, and then it goes into like a sea shanty like upbeat song.
Yeah. So that's like, again, I've missed some like little bits, but that is the story. That's what happens.
Yeah. On paper, yeah. That's it.
Because yeah, even the first time, some of those things aren't entirely clear. I think the most confusing thing is basically when you realize that he's an unreliable narrator, and that what you've seen isn't necessarily true. I think I am like, just maybe this is the time to just ask some like questions about it. What's up with the fact that we see him working all the time, and then later Willem Dafoe implies that he never works, that he's always drunk, and then he reads. One of the things that makes Pattinson snap is reading the review, the manual, the logbook, in which it says that he's been basically describing what Willem Dafoe's been like. So what's happened there?
So I think that's like a small part of... So I think that's one of the themes of the film, is to do with labour. So I think that's like a layer to the film. So obviously we'll go more into it, but I think what Robert Eggers is doing is taking... various different mythologies, folklore, themes, and then adding it onto like the historical period and commenting on the labour movement. Because if you take it that he's left his job working in timber because he hates it. He's like, he says a speech, he's like, I want a house of my own and I want a wife. I don't want to have to take orders from anyone. He swapped his job. And now he's starting at the bottom again. Or Willem Dafoe is saying, no, you need to earn this.
Okay.
And even though he's working really hard, he's getting nowhere because the boss can just be like, no, I'm not paying you. So I think that's one element of it where you can just constantly like work. It doesn't matter how hard you work. There's someone above you that can like stop your pace, ruin your life, that sort of thing. So I think that's like an element to it. So I think he is working. Okay. I think it's Willem. So Willem, we'll get into it when we get to it. But I don't think Willem Dafoe is who he says he is.
Okay. So definitely wanting him on that. So, and I hear you on the theme. I'm gonna... I don't know if in your notes you have a list of themes, but I think, we keep those. Obviously, you've explained the later one really well. But later on, we can just like, you can basically tell us about as many themes as you want. But concretely from the story point of view, he is doing the work, and Willem Dafoe's just fucking him, basically.
Yeah. Because I think that's one of the readings that people have various different readings about the film, and like I said, I think it depends on what you'll bring into the film as well. But there has been people that have said this feels like a genre version of like my life. They're like, I'm always working and I'm not getting anywhere. So I think if you come in from that angle, you might see that in the film.
That's very interesting, and a lot of people can relate to that. So I guess same vein, when we see Willem Dafoe smashing the boat, and then they're inside, and he says, "No, you're the one that just smashed the boat." / let's just throw in the time when he's like, "No, it's been weeks, not days."
Yeah.
What, is that gaslighting?
I think he's gaslighting.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think So there's a couple of things that Robert Eggers has said are specific themes. He said one of them is toxic masculinity, and one of them he's referred to it as a Jungian horror film, which obviously we can get into a bit more. But I think that the gaslighting elements commenting on the toxic masculinity side of things. So I think he's deliberately being like, no, no, I'm. So he goes, he changes his character depending on what Robert Pattinson's given him as well. So in that moment, he's like, oh, I'm really like, he acts really small. Don't you? I just want to kill old Tom. He's acting weak. He's trying to make Robert Pattinson go mad.
Okay, fair enough. I noticed that there's never, obviously, the other ship doesn't come to pick them up, and we said why that is. But there's never any interaction with other ships, whereas the lighthouse is supposed to guide them. So, like, is that anything symbolic or thematically about? Are they even doing anything? Is there any point to what they're doing?
So some people have said like the lighthouse itself, because obviously in mythology and just in like psychiatry, lighthouses represent specific things. But the lighthouse itself is not supposed to guide you to it. It's supposed to keep you away from it, but they're going towards it. So it's like they've already done. So the lighthouse is warning you stay away the whole time. But they obviously that's part of their job, but they're heading towards it.
So actors, both actors had seen The Witch and wanted to work with him, and he wanted to work with them. And was it written with them in mind, or?
No, so the Lighthouse, he'd actually started, the script for Lighthouse had actually started writing before The Witch was made anyway. So he went back to Lighthouse, but so from what I know is that he'd done The Witch, it was quite a big success. Like critically, no, obviously it wasn't like a box office smash, but he'd won like a Sundance Award. Critics loved it, that sort of thing. So both of them had contacted him. He then gone on to make he was developing two other films after The Witch for bigger studios, and he basically would not lament on what they wanted him to do. But one of them, he'd offered a role to Robert Pattinson, and it said, I can't remember the full. He basically said it was like a Victorian like whiskey drinking gent. He'd approached up Rob Pattinson. Rob Pattinson come back saying, "I would just be playing me." And so Rob Pattinson basically specifically said, "I want something that's going to challenge me, and I want something weird."
Yes, that's all.
And then Willem Dafoe was basically just, "I'll do whatever you want." But yeah, both of them had approached him, which I don't know how common that is that happens, but obviously they've both seen it and gone, "We need to work with this person."
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it with auteur directors, it is something, obviously they're more high profile, but the Scorseses, the Nolans, the Tarantinos, that is just one that when actors they express an interest in. Obviously, these directors all want to work with the best actors as well, so that's very cool. Do you want to say a little bit about both of them and where they're at in their careers?
Yeah, so I feel like Rob Pattinson was post Twilight, because I know around Twilight, I think he did that Remember Me, and the circus one where he was in the circus with Reese Witherspoon was like another romantic film. I can't think what the name of it was, but then post Twilight, it seems like he's made a very conscious effort to work with like auteurs, work with like work with directors that provide like challenging material. He's done some foreign language films. He's done like roles that have like required him to change his like public persona of himself. I think this is probably the best performance he's given. So I feel like you don't see much of Robert Pattinson as we know in this character. And then Willem Dafoe's obviously been one of those actors throughout his filmography. He does like some big mainstream stuff, like he does the Spider-Man films, he's an Aquaman, but he's always weird in every single thing he's in. He's got a face, hasn't he? He can manipulate his face, which says, like, side note, why would you cast Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man and then put a mask on when he can he can do everything in space? But obviously he's very established by this point. And also he's like known from the theatre, so that's where Rob Eggers' background is in directing theatre, acting in theatre, producing it. So those two are on the same sort of wavelength. And it just seems like but almost seem like the young and old versions of each other. Like I see Pattinson becoming a Willem Dafoe as he gets older.
So yeah, those are very interesting. So the characters, I guess we've talked already quite a lot about the Robert Pattinson one. So give us your thoughts on Willem Dafoe's character.
So I don't. So if I'm reading it as I think it's supposed to be, I don't think Willem Dafoe is a man. Okay. In the film, so there's just so I can get the names right. Yeah, so I think Willem Dafoe is a Greek god called Proteus. So they basically, he's referred to as a sea god, or they call him the old man of the sea.
Okay.
One thing of his like origins is he is located on a island. Oh yeah, Pharos. So in sort of like mythology, Pharos was an island where the very first lighthouse was built as well, and he's Proteus himself in like the Greek gods is a shapeshifter, and he doesn't like to share knowledge with anyone.
So he's there in human form.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
but okay.
But I also think he's the mermaid. And I think so all the images that you're seeing of him. So there's that moment where it's about 30 minutes into the film where Rob Pattinson can't sleep, so he goes up to the lighthouse and he's looking underneath the lighthouse. And you can see Willem Dafoe's naked up there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start seeing tentacles.
Yeah.
I think that's him still being
Transforming.
Yeah, transforming himself, yeah. Just because I think he also speaks about Prometheus. So as he's dying, he mentions Prometheus, he mentions Poseidon, Neptune. So it's all I think he's very so I think that's what he's done is taking these myths and then place them onto this like historical period. But obviously it doesn't seem coincidental like, why he's quoting Greek mythology all the way through. And he doesn't seem, like you said, he doesn't seem surprised by anything. He's quite like calm. Sometimes he just disappears. There's that bit where as soon as Robert Pattinson spills his beans, he turns and he's gone.
Right.
As well. So he's like the keeper of this like island. So I think Robert Pattinson is supposed to represent Prometheus. He basically wants to get hold of even the Promethean myth. He stole fire to give to everyone else and then was punished by the gods. Because Prometheus, I'm probably getting, I'm no Greek mythology, but the way he's punished is he has to stay on a rock and have his liver hacked out over and over and over again, which I think that's what the ending is.
Yeah, I did see that. It's a very specific. I knew about Prometheus. I didn't know that was his exact punishment, but that seems like a very easy explanation. Because without that ending makes no sense. But so that's that one seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so I think that's why. But then again, there's another way. If you don't know anything about the Greek mythology, you could just say these two men have gone on an island. The isolation, the lack of like nutrients, the weather, everything's playing a part into like he's already frustrated, he's angry. Then they start drinking. They start drinking like the chemicals as well.
Turpentine, honey, I think.
And then you could basically just say all that this situation, the isolation, they don't get on. They're very sexually frustrated. There's all that sort of elements. They could have literally got drunk, missed the boat, or the boat's not been able to get to him because of the storm. Because from that period on, the storm never stops. And then he's gone mad and he's seeing things and then he's killed his boss. And then he's looking, you could even say he's looking into the lights. I think you can view it as a few different ways, but if you're going on the base, if you're taking it just as all this stuff's happening, it's all a hallucination, he could be looking into the light. And I think he's like laughing because he's just realised he's just like,
it's just
he's killed him and this doesn't mean anything. I think that's how you can view it as well.
But that's one of those, it feels very much like it's up to you to decide.
Yeah. So the symbolism's very specifically there.
Yeah. Like the Prometheus thing is like undeniable. I mean, and then to your whole point about Willem Dafoe being the god, during one of the flashes, he is shown as having this, I mean, obviously we saw the tentacles.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as it's one thing when someone comes up with a far-fetched theory that could technically be theoretically true, but when you get even one image that confirms that theory, it's like, there's at least a hint that it's there.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think obviously there's other sort of symbols. Obviously, the mermaids in sort of like mythology, they lured people to their death.
Yeah,
that I think that's very, very specific. So the mermaid is when you go more into like folklore, the folklore side of things. But then also you can apply the idea of the American Gothic. It's like a very specific type of like horror, which is all about isolation and going mad, and it very much deals with they call it the consuming house spirit. So it's like a build. So in American Gothic, you'd say that this building is causing all of this. So you think of The Shining and the hotel, or the Haunting of Hill House. It's very specific. So you could say the lighthouse and the building itself, that's causing all of this stuff to happen as well. So I feel like he's taking all these different images, these folklores, these myths, and placing it all together. And then so then you can read it, because when you break it down, no matter which way you're looking at it, all of it works.
But then is it all of it can work, but then also there is no. Let's say it's literally what you said, that no question, no interpretation. Willem Dafoe is this god that takes these different shapes. I'm guessing if you take that all the way through, there are still little things that don't make sense, that aren't fully explained by that particular narrative, because there is a lot of open to interpretation.
Yeah. So I think like then, because there's a lot of bits where it becomes almost like neo-realism bits where it's literally just shot. There's like they're just working, there's talking. It doesn't feel like mythic in a way. But yeah, I think basically I think there's multiple ways you can view it, and it does it does work depending on what you're bringing to. Because I know some people have also viewed it as being about being very homoerotic, and it could be repressed sexualities.
And there's a whole father-son Oedipus dynamic I read as well.
Yeah, and then also with the Greek mythology is as well. With Prometheus, the lighthouse opens, and they're saying that's like Pandora's box, which is going to bring. So, or there's also, it seems very specific because and then he basically, because he's referred to it. So this is going really like no,
go for it.
Because he's referred to it as a Jungian horror film. That's how he's like described it. So in Jungian theory, the sea is a symbol of the collective unconscious. But when the water goes black, so black water represents the unconscious taking over, but lighthouses represent individual consciousness. And in his theory, when the unconscious and the individual conscious like combine, that's like danger and death is going to happen, which you could do it as that as well. Because when you go into that side of things, the lighthouse itself is very phallic. So apparently like a lot of like old books and regarding lighthouses, they do refer to them as like in some cases as resembling erect penises.
I mean, they do.
And they're saying also with lighthouses as well. No one lighthouse looks like another, so they're basically saying all around the world, penises, which then sort of plays into. Because there's a lot of wanking in this film.
Actually, is it? Or we never see Willem Dafoe doing it, do we?
Yeah. So when Pattinson's looking up, he's naked. Is
that meant to become?
Oh god.
But then, because that is about maybe now is the time. Might as well talk about it. A lot of people do know of this movie, and literally in the last couple of days, I've mentioned to a couple of people that we're going to record this episode, and people literally go, "Oh yeah, that's the thing where Robert Pattinson jerks off."
Yeah.
And I think I did know that before watching the movie the first time, but it's one of those when you watch the movie, you go, "Oh yeah, that's in there," and then there's so much other weird stuff that you almost not forget, but you're like, "Oh yeah, that is the thing that it's known for." Do you think? Take it out of the highbrow stuff just for a second. When they put stuff like in there, they're like, yeah, this is gonna get people. I feel like that is put in there to like a shock value and for the less sophisticated people to kind of stick out as something they'll remember, even though it has lots of significance, like with the whole mermaid and the sexual repression and stuff. But it does feel like it's just there to shock.
Well, because he's basically said it was all about. If you go down the toxic masculinity route, he's on about like everything that he wanted to sort of feature everything that would come out.
Also, concretely, like. That would happen. That's like two guys in that situation, and then especially in a, this is taking place in the 1800s, right?
Yeah, I think it's like,
I think it's say 1890s.
Yeah, 1890. Yeah,
and the mermaid statue, like that's probably one of the most realistic things in the whole movie.
I also think that mermaid statue as well. That's almost like a trap. I think because I feel like that's specifically been put in. So he sits on the bed there,
it's there,
and then the hole's there straight away. But then also it goes all over the place. But the farting is like
Yeah, what is
very
that?
specific. It's like apparently in some cultures that's like the man marking territory and being like you're subordinate to me. I'm literally going to fart. Our first encounter is going to be I'm going to fart in your face and you'll get because he basically keeps going on. So you could share it with like the labor movement and like the whole Proteus thing, but he doesn't want to share any power. He's basically I'm in charge. I'm like the king. You're going to do everything I tell you to.
Yeah.
And he's like sort of he's basically showing no respect. And he keeps calling him the dog as well. Like it's like you're below me. The back to the wanking is like means something as well because he's Rob Pattinson having to go into like a little dank cold shed to masturbate and Willem Dafoe stood on the top of the tower and he just wanking for like it's like the king of the castle.
Yeah, there's multiple references like the time when he's below, but there is a time when he's down there and we see up and he is just naked.
Yeah.
Okay, again, specific question, and maybe it goes back to it. I remembered it from earlier. When he's painting the tower, this is in the first maybe 2025. He's painting the tower. Willem Dafoe is like helping him, but then he drops him and he falls. What's the significance of that? Because
I think it's just him like getting in like I think he's deliberately trying to scare him. And they don't ever finish the tower anyway. So it obviously wasn't like that an important job. But then I think it's also significant. He wakes up and Willem Dafoe's not even bothered to check on him if he's okay.
does he wake up? He wakes up on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's just another like dominating thing. Because I did wonder if that's like, oh, did he like knock his head and maybe that's like a shift and stuff.
But also, if you go back to Robert Pattinson's basically saying, I don't want to do this work, I don't want to have a boss. And Willem Dafoe's basically saying, you need to earn.
Yeah.
Then you could go into that sort of the Promethean myth of he's basically taking the easy way. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He just wants to kill the guy and try and take over.
Yeah, well, because he said, so I guess I feel like you've got a very Robert Pattinson, like you're very much on his side.
Yeah.
But if we flip it, like just as an exercise, and we put it from the Willem Dafoe, like, and even in stuff like the labor stuff, you can look at it as this ungrateful guy, not even ungrateful, but this guy thinks he's gonna come. I've been doing this my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm the king. I'm the king of the lighthouse. And he thinks he's gonna come up after one trip. I think you can see it from his point of view. I guess in this situation, he is just a man. He's not a god or anything. And then that's it when Robert Pattinson gives his whole I just basically he's hardworking, but he's like, I want an easy life, I want this, I want that. And he just shuts him up and he's like, same story.
Yeah.
So it is like he's been dealing with people like him that Robert Pattinson thinks that he's special. And again, that whether it's the labor movement, whether it's 21st century, like everyone's special, whatever, I think there is an element of that. And Willem Dafoe is saying, no, you're just a wiki. You're part of this. You work your way up. You'll get it.
So I think also Willem Dafoe's character, if we're going down like him being a man, he's basically saying, I've devoted my whole life to get to this point. And he's like left his family, he's left his children, hasn't he? Because he's like, I want to be in this lighthouse. Like, this is what he wants to be there. And Rob Pattinson is just looking for a job to get out of his current life.
Which that's where I think, like, sometimes in the end, 21st century, like labor market, there is this. We're in our 30s now, but there was a sense, especially coming out of business school, people thought that at 23 they'd be like, deciding on marketing campaigns or involved in big decisions, and part of it is because you study these things at university, and then you get there and it's like, no, just look at data for 5 years, and then maybe you'll get to sit in the back of a meeting and so on. And there's going too far, especially talking about toxic masculinity when it's like women or people of color who are white people are over them. But there is an element of you're 23 years old, you do need to work your way, like you do need to do years of those 4-week shifts before you go up to it. So
I guess you could also, if we get on that route as well, you could view it as like Willem Dafoe. I'm guessing he's supposed to be in this like in his 60s.
Yeah.
People had higher lives back then, so he can be 30. But like, there's very much he's holding on to it, isn't he? He doesn't want to let go.
Yeah.
He doesn't want. So you could sort of view it as, if we're going down to like reflecting our times, people are holding on to
And there was no retirement plan.
They're holding property, that sort of thing. So
and relying on the labor of like the young.
Yeah, because really, in fact, they're both technically there to work, but Willem Dafoe is.
Yeah, and he's manning the light, but he's not actually doing anything. this is literally a practical detail more than even I don't think it's going to bring up any themes. The coal, like I'm sure there's a little symbol to that, but the coal that he's shoveling, is that to keep the light? No, because the light is kept on from the turpentine.
Yeah.
He brings up with the whole he brings the whole barrel, and then it's like, no, just use this. So is that for the rotation?
I'm not sure. So the only time you see the coal used is in the fire. But then he's literally got he's got like a bucket, not a bucket, like a wheelbarrow full of coal.
Yeah, but he's looked like he's shoveling it in a furnace, like it's a train or something. So I didn't fully understand what that was
That's
actually.
the thing as well, Kyle. I do wonder when you watch it, like, is all the stuff that he's doing necessary, or is it all just like do it?
Yeah,
Like, because even that's the one thing that's strange about the film. So even when
the one thing that's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all hell breaks loose, they just keep on drinking and doing their jobs. They don't stop at any point. It's only the last day that they actually stop working, which is just like, so it's almost like, yeah, maybe it's reflecting like nowadays you could just be like, oh, no matter how bad things are, you've still got to like just get on with it and work and work and work. So I'm not sure about the coal. I know there's the bit where he puts the cleaner in the water tank.
That was confusing because it was like he's just pouring sand into a water
So
tank.
also in the screenplay as well. What's strange is that's referred to as looking beautiful.
What is?
The shot of the water, like all get like the two merging.
Right.
It's like white and black. Liquid isn't merging together, but then the music's going. But that's supposed to be like a enchanting moment.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how how you view that side of things. But then there's another. You can look at it in a religious context where this either could be purgatory,
Okay.
and they've got 4 weeks. Just do the work, like because if you
Are they both in purgatory, or is Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe's like a gatekeeper?
I don't know what Willem Dafoe. That's the only thing I don't know what Willem Dafoe's supposed to represent in that. But he's also got a bit of a bad past, hasn't he? And it's almost implied that he's killed.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of the other questions. So, yeah, if let's go back to your main theory that he is the god of the god of the sea and lots of different things. So in that scenario, what's the whole story with the last person and then the head in the basket?
I sort of view it as all the seagulls on the island are all the people that have come before Robert Pattinson.
Right, and he's just defeated them one by
Because
one.
if you think about
Yeah, he says the seagulls are the souls of sailors.
yeah, it had this tons and tons of seagulls. So the seagulls could just be sailors. Like if we're going down that route, then they could be the souls of sailors. But there's that one seagull with the one eye missing that specific.
Yeah.
So you could view it as the tapping at the window is obviously like an Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven reference.
Yeah.
But is this seagull tormenting Robert Pattinson, or is he saying
Warning him.
warning him to go away? But if going to the religious context, say if this is purgatory, it's almost like you've got 4 weeks, do the work, put the work in, and then you leave. So obviously those two guys leave at the beginning.
Yeah.
But he could, on the very last day, he's told, don't do it. But don't, just do your work, don't hurt the seagulls, blah, blah, blah. And then on the very last day, he killed.
It is the last day he
Yeah,
kills
yeah,
the seagull.
On the
So
very last day, yeah.
I mean, these all tie in together.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah. So what does the seagull? I mean, we've just said the souls and stuff, but is that it, or do the seagulls and the curse and the killing of the seagull, does that represent anything?
So you
more?
could, I mean, you could view it as like Robert Pattinson bringing it on himself. So is he the cause of all
Yeah.
of this, or is the seagull Willem Dafoe as well?
Haunting it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess if he is this god figure and he's
Shapeshifter.
oh, so you think but he killed it, so he didn't kill Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, that's like, so that's I sort of go down the route of I think that's seagull's warning him. I don't think he's tormented him. I think he's telling.
Yeah, again the not literal, but the physical explanation. It feels that it is I don't know how he killed the previous guy, but he did for his head to end up there,
Yeah.
and then his soul has gone into the seagull, and he keeps him around. It reminds me almost of in Little Mermaid, how Ursula has all of her victims living in little trees around.
Yeah, so with the Hans Christian and the Little Mermaid, it's the original story is not how we view it.
No, I've read the original. It's so dark.
That sort of plays into more of like the American like myth
Yeah.
side of things. And it's just like, it's just horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's sort of,
She's just failed. For people who don't know, is that basically she fails at the whole mission and dies, and but
all
then
the way through, she's in pain because they basically, every step you take is going to be, you're going to feel like you stepped on a knife.
yeah, that was it.
So, but we see it as like,
She got the man in the end.
so obviously that would sort of like play into it. But yeah, is it so, or is we're going down the route of Rob Pattinson's just gone mad? Does he then go, I've killed the seagull, oh no, things are going to happen? Like, and that built into his psyche that he's caused all of this as well?
Or is so that thing you're saying that the madness is self-inflicted?
Yeah.
But it is also the one where there was a curse, because there's two curse. There's the bad luck, because obviously sailors have huge superstitions in general, and so whether it's the seagull or, even though it turns into a joke, Willem Dafoe does spend about 4 minutes putting a curse on him and naming that he names all of the maritime gods that you said. So it does feel like one of those two things could be where, okay, now he's cursed, and so he's been made to go mad by whether it's the gods, the island, or whatever.
Yeah, because that's one thing with Willem Dafoe. We know that he's an unreliable person as well.
Yeah,
he mentioned his leg twice.
Yeah,
but then also he's not. His leg's absolutely fine because he's dancing.
Right.
Okay. And it's like, I mean, his legs, he's moving about fine. He's getting up and down the stairs fine. Yeah. We're supposed to go, oh, he's like, he can't, that's why, yeah.
You see, this is why I want to rewatch it again. I want to like pay attention to all those details. Another big one, which again, let's talk how it ties into different theories and also generally, is the alcohol. So let's just start with, we can always start with your main thread of, okay, if he's the god, why is he drinking all the time?
I'm not sure on that point. That's just like, I think
or is he just trying to tempt him?
I think he might be trying to tempt, because you could go, so there's a reading of it that if we're going down the Christian route, so Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and the devil was there trying to tempt him out of it. Some people have read it that the Willem Dafoe's character is saying, how long have we been here? Was it 5 weeks? 5 weeks is almost like lining up with the 40 days spirit of it. So is he literally just trying to tempt him? And if he's just a good guy, because he basically says, so is he declining drink because he's an alcoholic, or is he declining the drink because of what he says? Because he says it's the rules, so I need to stick to the rules.
But that would make sense that he's testing him, and then he almost makes it to the end, but then on the last day he gives in, and then he doesn't make it out of purgatory.
Yeah.
God, yeah, I like that one. I mean, yeah, this definitely feels like it's like you say, the different theories that are brought together and pile on top of each other.
I think it's very deliberate as well, because Robert Eggers, obviously, he's mentioned like the Jungian side of things. He said he's very interested in mythology. He's very interested in the occult. He's very interested in religion. He's interested in like superstition. So I think he's very deliberately taken everything and then just applied it to this setting where it all works. So like with the Lighthouse is a very sort of evocative setting as well, isn't it? And it's going to be isolation. So you're just adding all these elements on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect, like, A, it's a metaphor. B, it's isolated. C, it's surrounded by the sea.
Yeah.
There is the work to be done, because there aren't really any other things. It's a perfect setting for that sort of thing.
That's why I love it so much, because every time I watch it, I see something else.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, it's a very, very different movie, but something like Inception on a different way. I've probably watched that one movie about 10, 12 times. And I think there's like first to fifth, you're like, and you probably have this experience with this movie where, okay, first time discovering it, then you like, and this is me now with this film, maybe you fast forwarded me a couple of viewings, but I probably watch it thinking I know it, especially after our conversation. And maybe I watch it in a couple of years. It's like, oh, there's this whole other side that you don't even think of. And then sometimes you go back and forth between, oh, maybe I was right about that before. And that, I mean, these movies, ironically, was talking about Inception. It is almost like the eternal staircase of everything's open to interpretation. There's multiple symbolisms, double entendres and everything.
Yeah. I think it's also, so when, I can't remember exactly what I thought was going on, but I remember as a kid, I was interested in like Greek mythology. And I did recognize certain like the words, and I sort of remembered, I think I thought that it was the Proteus. Couldn't remember the Proteus name. I thought it was a different type of sea god at the time, but I was like, there's something going on here. But yeah, like I said, we can view it in so many different ways, and it sort of works for you personally, depending on where you're coming from, or you might just watch and go, "What the hell? I
Which,
don't like this."
yeah, which I think is the problem with most people, and I think it's a shame because, and again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying this movie should be any way different, but the risk is obviously in this case it hooked enough people that it's become sort of cult classic. But the risk is always that it's not engaging enough. And actually, I think we've gone over the themes really well. So I think this is a good segue onto the dialogue and script because I think even that, the way the dialogue is, and it's very wordy and it has an accent. And obviously, I read all this stuff about how like they were coached to speak in a very specific way. And again, it adds so much, like you say, a different world. But I think again, it's an extra barrier for your average viewer because I think when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this you really need the subtitles on, and not just to follow, but just to appreciate it. Because I'm sure you still there are lines that you're like, oh, hadn't registered that one before because sometimes it's very quiet, but the other times it's very wordy.
So one thing that he said as well in terms of the diet, he's very like specific about his research. So he found interviews with sailors and lighthouse keepers from that period. So he was reading like Herman Melville, Robert Louis Stevenson. He was taking all this dialogues. He wanted it to be period accurate.
Yeah.
Then obviously he's taking the mythology. He was taking bits from that. But he's also said if you turn the dialogue off, it doesn't matter. You can see exactly what's going on. So I've not done that. But he said he wanted to create the film that even if you couldn't hear it, everything's happening, so you knew exactly. It still works on that level as well. So he was saying that he picked that up from, I think it was Alfred Hitchcock would always watch his films with the sound down to see if you can still, as an audience member, pick up on. So you don't have to listen to the dialogue. But he said if you know what's going on, what he's quoting, you know what's going on. It's also bits that he said people think is like Robert Pattinson speaking in tongues when they're both drunk and they're dancing and he's singing us up. And he's like, oh no, that's an actual song. There's lyrics. He's like, put subtitles on, there's lyrics. He's like, that's an actual song. So it's all very like, the dialogue's very specific, I think.
Yeah, I saw that each actor, I think both they were told to and then coached during to have their very specific accents. I think Willem Dafoe was more the sailors. I think Robert Pattinson, they said, was like a Maine lobster fisherman from like 1900s.
And that's how they would speak, yeah. One thing I've noticed as well with Robert Pattinson, I don't know if it's deliberate. I'm going into the basics because everything in this film seems very deliberate. His accent changes when he starts to reveal what his real name is. Right. And reveal his past. It changes ever so slightly, whereas he's very broad at first, isn't he? It's a very broad accent, so it's almost like he's pretending because he's taking on this.
Yeah, he's trying to sound like the guy who stole his identity.
And I think also that's why the acting is so good, isn't it? Because the Willem Dafoe's character specifically is if you got a lesser actor to be it, it's almost like doing the pirate voice, the pirate imitation.
Oh yeah,
you need an actor who can really sell it. And I think he really sells it really well.
I read somewhere that they were originally going to give him like a patched eye and a peg leg, and they were like, no, he'll actually look like a pirate head, so they had to not do it. But it's interesting about obviously the dialogue in the script. They guide you along a lot of these theories, like when he mentions he mentions Prometheus by name, or he like explicitly evokes it when he's about to be.
So he mentions Prometheus specifically when Robert Pattinson's burying him. Because then at that point he's like, I know what you're going to do. He's mentioning that. He mentions like Neptune quite frequently.
But so that it guides us, it educates us like on these theories. But you are saying that it wasn't meant to be essential. That everything that's happened you should be able to get it like just from watching it, which is interesting to make it's like this. Yeah, the script isn't essential. So
I think it's almost like he's basically trying to craft the world where he's trying to get rid of plot holes and everything's very deliberate. So this should work on any different level. It's almost like a very because there's so many. How many films are there where there's a plot twist and then you go, hang on, actually, what does that mean? Or it could even be something like, oh, the twist makes sense on a technical level. But then that changes the character's dynamic. Why was the character acting like this in that scene? Whereas it's almost like he's gone in like, You can't get out of this puzzle. I
I mean, if this is a puzzle, it's like you're trying to solve a Rubik's cube, but then you suddenly realize that it's a game of backgammon, and then it turns into like a game of roulette. Or I don't know what. Like it's just always changing on you.
Because also, I don't necessarily think the puzzle is. I wou't go in say it's like a puzzle box film. I don't think
It's not one answer, like who did it, or
yeah. I don't think it hinges on figuring out exactly what's happening.
What if, not to contradict you, but if we did have to boil it down to like one question, what would you say is like the main question of the film? Not philosophically, but in terms of what's going on.
I guess you go down sort of the basic level of going, is it what I'm watching?
Yeah.
Real?
Yeah. So, or is he or is he gone?
So I don't know if I'm trying to think now. Is it? I don't think we ever see point of view shots from either of them. I don't think it ever goes into like this is what the character's looking at.
I think the only one I can think of is when
when
he's
the light.
That and when he's hallucinating and I don't know if he's hallucinating, when he sees Willem Dafoe as like the god, that seems very much like it's from
but is it from his shoulder? Is it like
no, he's looking at him face on, like he's either on top of it or he's lying in bed and it's peering in front of him.
Right. Because it's just I think that's almost, is it like, I guess the big question technically is like what's in the light? And again, I think that's open to interpretation.
So I was trying to think of things. Again, this is not the most important thing, but things that it reminded me of in terms of that. And I'm going to be pretty basic here, but the two things that came to mind were this. The first one is silly. The second one I think is more interesting. The first one is the gold in Pulp Fiction. Again, obviously the light and the fact that Quentin Tarantino was basically like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just it's whatever you want it to be.
And that's actually a reference to another film from the 60s.
Yeah, it's a surprise.
She's basically lady comforting. I don't think it's a briefcase. I think it's a box. She opens the box and then her face lights up a bit and she screams. So it's almost got that element to it as well.
And then the other one, which ties into that, is the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones, because obviously when the light kills everyone who looks at it, sort of thing. So
was the Ark of the Covenant? They're not worthy to look at it. Or is it something like we can't comprehend what it is?
I mean, it opens interpretation. I mean, on a concrete basis, it looks like anyone who looks at it will happen, because obviously Indiana Jones and Marion don't look at it, and that's what saves them. But yeah, it probably is not worthy, does not comprehend. And I think in all of these the point is no one is, and obviously it's very Pandora boxy, as you said as well.
So I also think if we're going down the Greek mythology route as well, if Prometheus is supposed to represent like humanity, because Willem Dafoe seems fine looking at it and he's enchanted by it and everything like that, but Rob Pattinson looks at it and it basically
kills him.
Well, he's not dead, I guess. Is he dead?
He's dead.
Yeah.
Well,
he's alive. I think he's still moaning. What, has a pecking?
Well, I get. Well, you say purgatory, isn't that because the whole point of Prometheus is that he never actually dies. He goes on, and he does get. I checked the Wikipedia from it. I went down the Wikipedia rabbit hole on this particular thing, and yeah, he does eventually get saved by I think Hercules, but then it becomes a whole other story.
People said if you look at it from a Christianity route, the light could be heaven, and he's climbing the stairway to heaven, and then he's been turned away because of what he's done.
The about the light you were saying. We don't know if Willem Dafoe is actually looking inside, because if he could be guarding it, just staying on the outside as like, again, he wouldn't be a god creature or whatever. Whereas we know that Robert Pattinson actually, it opens up for him.
Yeah. So it's almost like, is he? Yeah, because the way you cut to it, don't you? That one, but two, he's always naked when he's like looking at the light, and then he cuts that shot there where you sort of see his like in chest upwards, and he looks like he's in like ecstasy from looking at it, or again, if you view it a different way, he's just blind drunk, blind staring at. Maybe the light's driven him to where he is now. Because as soon as we're on the island, Willem Dafoe seems mad. It seems like maybe he's not like psychotic at first, but he seems like a man that's been in isolation himself for a long time.
But but he's actually been capable of handling.
Yeah,
because I guess he's gone through the right steps. He took his time. He was initiated to it properly, and now it's like his. I've just realized another thematic. It's kind of reminiscent of light of the ring in Lord of the Rings, and it's like Willem Dafoe is Gollum, who, despite becoming Gollum, the fact is he did stay with the ring for years and years and years, even though it turned him into what Willem Dafoe is. Whereas obviously Frodo was like a couple of days away from like dying from
Well, I
it.
guess I don't know if it's specifically for this film, but he's referenced Tolkien as being an influence as well in terms of like creating a world and the themes.
Yeah, I mean everything we talk about over the last 10 minutes of like the light, they are very universal themes. But...
Yeah. I think it's light means, because basically light in sort of mythology represents knowledge, hope, and security as well. So it's what all humans want, I guess, isn't it?
On the note of light, so we've spent a bit about dialogue script and we fell back into the themes, but that is the most important thing. Let's talk about literal light. And yeah, actually, this is a great segue of, so we talked about what this movie is trying to represent. Why was it necessary to make it in black and white in this very particular... I know some of the answers, but I want to hear you in this very particular, basically square format, and then let's talk about how they actually did that. So
with the square format, it's basically it was only used in cinema history for a very brief period of time. So it was when everything would move from silent cinema to sound cinema. That layover period, and that is when they use this. So not many films use it. And they basically said creating like almost like a perfect square image, which is really good for shooting tall objects at scale. Okay. So you can shoot the lighthouse, but also when you're shooting actors with it, it's good for close-ups. But if you put two people into like a location as well, it creates like a claustrophobic atmosphere because you can't see anything around them. Which then, if you put the sound, because I think sound's like a really key part of this film, the sound on it as well. There's all this like it's very claustrophobic film, like I think you're supposed to get the fact that they're in close quarters to each other, aren't they? They're sharing the same room, they're sharing, like everything seems really small and cramped. I think it's supposed to create like a bit of a claustrophobic atmosphere. With the black and white, it's supposed to evoke an old world period, also supposed to evoke an otherworldly period. Obviously, you can see everything in colour. But to get to that point as well, this is like another added layer on to the craft behind it. They are using vintage lenses as well that date back to some of them 1930s, some of them the early 1900s. They don't make these anymore, so they've had to attach these lenses on to almost get as close to the 1890s period as they can to evoke it. Then it's something with they had to then build custom-built filters to go to the black and white, so then they could use practical lighting, because in black and white photography, reds turned to black, so they wanted to see all the nooks and crannies of both of their faces, and they wanted to see all the pores, they wanted to see all the wrinkles, the bags under the eyes, they wanted to create all these shadows. But then to use the practical lighting, they then had to use lenses in the shot. So even though it looks like they're looking at, it's like a candle, isn't it, or a lantern over dinner, that light is actually 10 times brighter than the average studio light, to the point where the crew had to wear sunglasses.
Yeah, I read that.
And Robert Pattinson had to wear sun cream.
Yeah, it's crazy to make.
Looks like a candle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like it's lit by candlelight.
Yeah. That is such an interesting, like, technical fact that in order to make it such this dark movie, it had to be so bright. I also read you mentioned like all of the all lenses and everything, but apparently because this was, I don't know if it was, is it actually an island that it was filmed on, or is it just that it was on the coast?
It's on that peninsula.
Right, yeah, that's the scene, but it was very much in the sea, very much in the elements. They never, I always, one of the fun facts I like telling people who don't know much about movies is that one of the things I learned by one of the tours in Los Angeles was that 90% of the time with rain, they have to use machines, because even if it's really raining, rain has to be like 3 times thicker to actually appear on camera. And they were like, no, in this case, it was constantly raining. The rain was like crazy, so they actually used like the real elements. But because of that, the equipment was constantly breaking down. Yeah,
because actually one of the key things I think that's in like shows how determined and how specific everything was is the fact that they built the lighthouse themselves.
Yeah.
So it's an actual 70-foot lighthouse with the light that was stretched over 65 foot. So they said the lighthouse was a working lighthouse. and it was actually shining in the town's like windows while they were filming it. But they said the rock is faced. They chose a peninsula that had volcanic rock as well, so it would be all jaggedy and give like this sort of like feel to it. And then they said that they said basically 95% of the rain in that film was real, and it would already be raining, but for close-ups, they would then be hosing Robert Pattinson in the face with more water. And he said at times that water was minus 25 degrees. So they said there was bits where
Wait, how can water be minus 25? Isn't it frozen then?
yeah, so it splashed on the island and freeze.
Oh, God.
So it was like absolutely miserable. Because Robert Eggers said there's like a mix. So I've got, because I'm a nerd, I've got a couple of different copies of like the Blu-ray. But for the one that Universal Studios produced, he was like, I don't know where they must have found the 4 times that me and Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson were smiling. It's just to use it in acts. He said it was like a really grueling shoot. But he said again that added to the atmosphere of the film. Like it feels like, I think, like even when they're drunk, it feels like they're drunk. Like it's like really good drunk acting. They're not like, it feels really real. But apparently they were just chugging water. But they said after take of chugging that water, like was making you want to vomit as well. One of the key aspects as well is that it's single camera, so they don't have multiple cameras on them at once. So it was just like, we're shooting it.
And they're like, oh, it's moldy, it's broken down.
So it is wild. So they made it like, it just really feels like they've really tried to make it feel like an actual situation that's happening, I guess.
Yeah,
And then Willem Dafoe as well. He actually then rented out a fisherman's cottage by himself as well.
I read that the two of them didn't really talk before or during outside of shooting, and they rehearsed for weeks and weeks before like a play.
Yeah.
And then Willem Dafoe stayed in a cabin, Robert Pattinson stayed with the crew in a hotel, but then when they were on set, Robert Pattinson was isolated and Willem Dafoe was with the crew. Which I definitely think I saw this somewhere. Chemistry through tension is what Eggers described it at once, and that's really you can really feel that.
Yeah, and also you get the vibe because Robert Pattinson said he was openly intimidated by working with Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, fair enough.
And he's like, so Willem Dafoe comes from theatre, Robert Pattinson doesn't.
Yeah. I saw this.
Robert Pattinson's very much, and you get that cross, because Willem Dafoe's very confident.
Yeah.
Rob Pattinson does seem like he's all over the place during it, but that again is adding to the character as well.
I think I said it before, this movie cost $11 million to make, which obviously isn't huge, but that's quite a lot when you consider it's 2 guys on an island. But I think everything we just described, the days and days of shooting, all the film and all the cameras, like that must have cost a small fortune.
Yeah.
Then they must have spent, we talked about the foghorn, how they brought in just the right specialists to recreate exactly what it would have sounded back then. And then obviously you need to mold it to make it suitable for the movie. So like all of this like intricate detail. And
like the glass in the lighthouse as well had to be made because they couldn't find that glass from that period. And also apparently they were sat in meetings trying to get the budget, and he was like, well, I need to know now, otherwise there's not going to be a lighthouse in the film. So we need to start building all this sort of stuff. So there was the clothing as well as period accurate.
of course it is.
So they got all the period accurate, so they found photographs of all the keys from that period, even down to the hats, like why the hats have to be different. The hats represented status symbols as well. And then they'd get the outfits, and then to make them look worn, then they would be hand buffing and like getting them at seawater and buff to make effort. Because you get sometimes with certain period films where you're like, oh yeah, this sort of feel, but this feels like really like it's almost like someone's filmed that period at that time. We've just come across it because I think it's mad that you only got nominated for cinematography.
I thought about it before, and I thought about it obviously during our chat, like something like sounds as well. I would have thought it would have been. And I mean, even
like I can understand why people might have thought it's too weird for like a best picture type thing or anything like that, but the acting, like the production design,
production, everything you just said, production design. I mean, yes, I think cinematography, if you have to be nominated for one, that is a fair choice. But yeah, I mean, directing too. Quickly on, again, going back and forth between sections, but so you said, well, the acting. If one of them were to get a nomination, who do you believe was the better actor or gave the better performance? Or perfectly complimentary.
Yeah, it's a proper two-hander, isn't it? I think. I mean, I could see Robert Pattinson's obviously. I'd say he's the lead more than the
Okay, yeah, I see that.
but it's just like I feel like this is the best that Robert Pattinson's been. I think, and I think it's the most he's had to be tested.
Mm.
But they're both like just. This is why like it's really hard. It's really hard to think of people that wouldn't. Now that you've got these faces and these images, and you know all the photographs and watch the film, I think it's really hard to think who else could have done this. Even though there obviously must have been at some point. Like it's not set in stone that these two would have played.
I mean, from the sounds of how the movie came together, it seems pretty clear.
Like it's supposed to be.
Well, not that it was written for them, but yeah, I mean, they're such unique characters and portrayals, and anyone who came would have done it differently, and it would have been a different movie.
Yeah,
probably for better, for worse, probably for worse.
Yeah, imagine if like you had like a Johnny Depp doing like when Dafoe's character, then it would just end up being like a parody, wouldn't it? But also, there's humour to be found in it.
Oh yeah. I mean, we talked about it earlier about this movie being funny.
Yeah.
To me, I'll tell you my two, which I'm sure you agree with, and you can tell me others. I'll look out for more. I think the first one is when when he slaps. I mean, it's super basic. When he slaps him in the face for the first time, there's something really funny about that. And then I think this is considered the funniest bit, is when he complains about the cooking, and then he goes,
"Oh yeah."
I found the quote on IMDb, and it is a gigantic paragraph, and he gives that curse to him.
Yeah. So that curse is actually. So if you watch it, he doesn't blink.
Yeah, I saw you in 2 minutes. He did it in one shot.
And that whole scene is 2% of the whole film.
Jesus Christ! And then at the end, he just goes, "Yeah." I see the first time. I think you're just like, "What the fuck is going on?" You don't appreciate.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think. And also, where I love the bit where he sneaks up on him and he's like, come with me," and he goes, "What's that?" And he's just like a little dot on the floor. I just think that cut's really funny because it's like you see his thing, it goes really quickly down to the ground. I think it's deliberately supposed to be funny.
Yeah. I have actually read somewhere, I think it was probably Eagers in an interview, saying that he was, that was it, when he was writing the script, and maybe when he was reviewing it at the end, and they were like lined up. So I think this does actually answer our question. I'm pretty sure I read that when he was finalizing the script, they were both signed on, and that he felt the need to make the movie darker because he was worried that in the current version, because they were such charismatic, funny people, it was going to be too funny.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, they can be funny moments, but this isn't a comedy.
Yeah.
So the idea that he was like, no, we need to make it darker.
Because he also said that he was like, he wanted, it's weird when he's watched it and there's not much laughter, because he's like, oh no, you are allowed to laugh. It's funny.
But you definitely have to have watched it more than once, I think, to get the laughter part.
And I think it's a good contrast to the darkness, isn't it? And the manicness of it, because that speech is incredible, and the way it's shot's incredible. And then just to cut to a wide shot thing, going, yeah, like the music cuts, so there's no sound. That's all.
So before we get to the big question of whether this is your favorite movie of all time, we talked about the production, the script, the theme. What is it? What's the hook about this movie that you love so much?
So I think it's a combination of a lot of different factors. We've had conversations in the past where I'm very big on craft. So I love the practical nature of it. I love the story behind how hard it was to shoot. Like, I feel like that all comes across in the film. But I love it's like a combination of various different, like we spoke about, myths, religions, like fairy tales, but it's also the way it feels. He's basically pulled different influences from like books as well, paintings, European art films as well. German expressionism's like a big one. When you look at German expressionism films, they like, this resembles it quite deeply. I think the acting's like incredible. I think the fact that you can look at it various different ways and it can work. And I think what's really special is he's pulled all these very much non-American influences together to make something that feels so like a new American myth. Like, if you'd heard this story written down, this feels like an Edgar Allan Poe short story. It feels like this is something that could be a book. Like, it's just, I think the whole film's just incredibly evocative of loads of different yeah, it just makes me feel like every time it's almost become like a bit of a comfort film to me. I've put it on when I'm feeling sick.
Crazy, which is crazy given what it's about. But
'Cause I always, and there's so many different styles of film that I like. But I've always, growing up, I always was interested in like the sort of darker side of film. So I always loved horror films, and this, along with like what A24 have done in the past 10 years, is almost taken the horror genre but added international cinema influences, American independent cinema influence, art house influences onto this genre to create a whole new movement of like horror cinema. That I hate the fact that people call it elevated horror, because it's still just like horror films. But yeah, I just think this is like the pinnacle of it, and also the fact that, like you said, it was made in 2019 and it's already such a big cultural film. Like, even it's a film this strange and this like handmade, and it's black, like you said, black and white. The audio's on like mono. It's very oppressive, but for it to have this much of a cultural impact on people, that people even if they don't watch any like art house cinema or independent cinema, people know about this film. And it's like people know the image. I think people know what Robert Pattinson looks like. Willem Dafoe.
The image of him jerking off.
Yeah. The spill your beans thing. People have like it's become like a meme as well. Like, there's all this sort of stuff. I think it's just like a really special film.
So let me try and summarize what you said. You can tell me if I'm off. If we could get into one sentence, so it's still three things, but thought-provoking, broadness of ideas, and attention to detail seem to be three compelling things.
Yeah, and I think there's the fact that it makes you can feel so many different things throughout it. Like, yeah, because it just, I mean, some people might get horny from watching it. I think it's funny. Some people might find it really scary. Some people might just view it as almost like a bit of a play, like this two-man play going on at the same time.
If it wasn't for all of the weird imagery, the fantasy stuff in like the last quarter, I was kind of thinking earlier it's almost like a play, but because of the importance of the imagery, it was not as a play. So, drum roll. Where does this rank all time in Danny's favorite movies?
Number 2.
Number 2. Wow. Well, we won't spoil for the viewers what number 1 is. They'll have to subscribe and follow us to find out another day. But for now, I have to say I'm really excited to watch this a third time. So, Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing with us your love of this movie.
My TED Talk.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll see you again on this podcast soon. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more content about classic movies for millennials, make sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube, as well as following us on Instagram, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.